Silence falls across the canyon as 5 agents take cover behind bullet-riddled vehicles, outnumbered and outgunned. Cartel rounds ping off metal as Border Patrol's desperate radio calls echo through command centers. The hitmen advance confidently, then freeze at a sound cutting through the desert air. Helicopter rotors. In the 12 minutes since first contact, 4 Marine Scout snipers have deployed to overlooking ridges with clear lines of sight. As the cartel gunmen celebrate their imminent victory, crosshairs settle on targets and triggers engage. The hunters never realized they were being hunted. But before we jump back into the video, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe because I have something really special for you tomorrow. And now, back to the video. Today, the borderlands belong to warriors who measure kills in kilometers. A shell casing tumbles through the air in slow motion, glinting in the harsh Arizona sun before landing silently in the dust. The shot itself makes no sound at this distance, just the delayed crack that follows as the first cartel gunman crumples mid-stride. The others pause, confused, scanning frantically before another falls. Then another. Panic spreads through their ranks, as an invisible force systematically eliminates their advantage. The tide has turned in seconds, and the predators have become prey. One of the agents, bleeding from a shoulder wound, exchanges a knowing look with his partner. Though they can't see their saviors, they know exactly what's happening. The cavalry has arrived, silent, lethal, and precise. Sierra 1, target down, whispers a calm voice into a radio, miles away from the chaos below. Moving to secondary targets. In the command center, screens display thermal signatures of remaining cartel members scrambling for cover that no longer exists. A senior officer watches grimly as justice unfolds in real time. Let them know, he orders quietly. Not on our border. Not today. 24 hours earlier, Supervisory Border Patrol Agent Miguel Hernandez stood at the edge of the Nogales station. Parking lot, coffee steam rising into the pre-dawn air. 15 years on the job had left permanent lines around his eyes, deepened by sun and stress in equal measure. His weathered green uniform, still crisp despite the desert's best efforts, bore the scars of countless patrols. "Morning, boss," called Agent Sarah Keller as she approached, her own coffee clutched like a lifeline. At 32, she was the newest, senior agent in the sector, transferred from Northern Border Operations just 8 months prior. The southern border was a different animal entirely, something she was still adjusting to. "Stars still out," Miguel noted, nodding upward. "Good day for tracking." They had developed this morning ritual, these few quiet moments before the chaos of shift change. Sarah had initially found Miguel intimidating. His reputation preceded him as one of the best trackers in the sector, with an almost supernatural ability to read the desert's subtle language. But she'd quickly discovered the gruff exterior hid a patient mentor with a dry sense of humor that appeared when least expected. "Cantrell and Reyes ready for today?" Miguel asked, referencing the 2 newer agents assigned to their team. Sarah nodded. "Reyes is inside loading up. Cantrell's running late, something about his kid being sick." Miguel's expression softened slightly. "Family first. Mendoza can fill in." Inside the station, Agent Diana Reyes methodically checked her gear, the ritual as familiar as breathing after 4 years with Border Patrol. A former Army MP, she carried herself with military precision. Back straight, movements efficient, nothing wasted. She looked up as Agent Thomas Mendoza entered, his normally cheerful face unusually serious. "You hear about the chatter?" he asked, voice low as he opened his locker. Diana paused. "What chatter?" Intelligence picked up something about Sinaloa making a big move. Extra patrols ordered for the next 72 hours. Diana finished checking her sidearm before holstering it. "They've been saying that for weeks. Probably nothing," Thomas shrugged. "Maybe. But my cousin works customs at the crossing. Says they caught 3 guys yesterday with encrypted sat phones. Military grade." Before Diana could respond, the station door swung open and Agent James Wilson strode in. At 52, he was the oldest field agent in the sector, eligible for retirement but unwilling to leave the job. His face, weathered like old leather, rarely betrayed emotion. Today was different. Concern creased his brow as he approached the pair. "You 2 are with Hernandez today?" Wilson asked, his voice gruff. Both nodded. "Keep your wits about you." "Intelligence. Confirmed El Cuchillo crossed into our sector 3 days ago." Diana felt her blood chill. El Cuchillo, the knife, was Sinaloa cartel's most notorious enforcer. His presence meant something significant was happening. He doesn't come north unless it's important, Wilson continued, and he never comes alone. Outside, Miguel checked his watch as the rising sun painted the mountains gold. Sarah followed his gaze to where the rugged landscape stretched toward Mexico, beautiful and unforgiving. Neither spoke what they both knew. The desert concealed dangers that changed daily, a chessboard where the pieces moved invisibly until they struck. Miguel, Sarah began hesitantly. I've been having these dreams lately, about being trapped in the canyon. Can't explain it, but premonitions? Miguel interrupted, his expression unreadable. No, just, I don't know. Anxiety, maybe. She laughed self-consciously. Forget I said anything. Miguel studied her for a moment. In 15 years, he'd learned to trust instincts, his own and others. We'll avoid the canyons today. Stick to the high ground. At the far end of the station, Sector Chief Alan Prescott reviewed the intelligence reports in his office, the fluorescent lights harsh against the dark morning outside. 27 years of service had taught him to recognize patterns, and the pattern forming now disturbed him deeply. Increased cartel activity, encrypted communications, unusual border crossings, all pointed to something imminent. His phone rang, the secure line from headquarters. Prescott, he answered, then listened intently. His expression darkened. Confirm. That intel. Another pause. And get me direct line to JSOC. This is beyond our capability. He hung up, then pressed the intercom. Get me Supervisory Agent Hernandez. Now. As dawn fully broke over the desert, Miguel's team loaded into their vehicles, unaware that forces were already in motion that would forever change their lives. Miles away, a convoy of unmarked trucks moved through the desert, carrying men with cold eyes and automatic weapons. And even further, at a military base in North Carolina, 4 Marines were being briefed on an emergency deployment to the Arizona border. The day had begun like any other, but the desert held secrets that would soon erupt in violence. In the border patrol vehicle, Miguel's radio crackled. Hernandez, return to base for new orders. Priority 1. He exchanged a look with Sarah in the passenger seat. The calm morning suddenly felt like the eerie stillness before a storm. Intelligence confirms a major shipment moving through Diablo Canyon tonight. Chief Prescott's voice cut through the tension in the briefing room as he pointed to the topographical map. Not drugs, people, high-value targets. The gathered agents exchanged glances. Human trafficking wasn't unusual, but the scale of resources being deployed suggested something different. What kind of high value? Miguel asked, his voice measured and calm despite the unease crawling up his spine. Prescott's jaw tightened. Foreign, nationals with specialized knowledge, scientists, engineers, being moved north by Sinaloa as part of a contract with unknown international buyers. Sarah leaned forward. Since when is Sinaloa in the people smuggling business for foreign powers? Since the money got too good to ignore, Prescott replied grimly. We're talking 8 figures per extraction, and they've brought in El Cuchillo to oversee security personally. The name hung in the air like a curse. Joaquin Velasquez, known as El Cuchillo, had left a trail of bodies across Mexico. Police officers, rival cartel members, journalists, even judges. His preferred method of execution had earned him his nickname. This operation is beyond our standard protocols, Prescott continued. We've been instructed to interdict and detain these individuals before they can be transported further north. Joint task force is being assembled, but intel suggests the window is tonight. We can't wait for full backup, he turned to Miguel. Hernandez, your team will set up observation at these 3 points. He indicated locations on the map. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. This is primarily intelligence gathering. We need eyes on target to confirm the package before we move in force. Miguel studied the map, a creeping sensation of wrongness working through him. Sir, these positions leave use exposed if something goes wrong. The canyon walls provide minimal cover and only one exit route. It's the only way to maintain visual contact without being detected, Prescott countered. And we need visual confirmation of the targets. Something in his voice made Miguel look up sharply. What aren't you telling us, Chief? Prescott hesitated, then lowered his voice. There's concern that this might include children. Intelligence suggests at least 2 minors with unusual capabilities, potentially being trafficked for research purposes. The room went silent. Every agent there had seen the horrors of human trafficking, especially involving children. It crossed a line that united them in purpose beyond badges and oaths. "Understood, sir," Miguel said quietly. "We'll get eyes on the targets." As the briefing concluded and agents dispersed to prepare, Sarah caught up with Miguel in the hallway. "This doesn't feel right," she said, keeping her voice low. "Why not wait for the task force? Why send us in undermanned?" Miguel checked to ensure they were alone. "Because someone higher up is pushing. This has political implications written all over it." "The dream, Miguel," Sarah insisted. "The canyon, I can't shake it." He placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. "We'll be careful. Extra precautions. I need you sharp, okay?" She nodded, swallowing her anxiety. "Always." In the armory, Diana and Thomas loaded extra magazines and checked their tactical gear. The tension between them was palpable until Diana finally broke the silence. "You ever seen El Cuchillo's work?" she asked quietly. Thomas shook his head. "Only photos during training. You?" "In person. Joint operation with Mexican authorities 3 years ago. We arrived too late." She slammed a magazine into place with unnecessary force. "He skinned the federal police officers alive, left them arranged like a dinner party around a table." Thomas crossed himself instinctively. "Christ." "No Christ there that day," Diana said flatly. "Just a devil who walks like a man." Agent Wilson joined them, his own gear already prepared. "You two ready for this?" "Yes, sir," they answered in unison. Wilson studied them for a moment. "Listen carefully. If things go sideways out there, you prioritize getting out alive. No heroes. Understand?" The younger agents nodded, but Wilson's words hung in the air, unspoken but clear. He didn't expect things to go according to plan. Cuchillo wiped his knife clean as he stared impassively at the body of the young scout who had delivered the news. The messenger wasn't responsible for the message, but discipline required consistency. "Repeat what you told me," he ordered the terrified lieutenant standing before him. "Border Patrol increased activity in all sectors," the man stammered. "Sources inside say they know about tonight's transport." El Cuchillo nodded thoughtfully. "And our contingency?" "In place. The former Rangers are positioned as you ordered. 12 men, all with combat experience. The package, arriving as scheduled. 2 hours." El Cuchillo smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. "Then we proceed, but with a modification." He stood, sliding his knife back into its sheath. "Border Patrol expects us to run when confronted. Instead, we will spring the trap on those who set it." He walked to a map spread across a makeshift table in the abandoned ranch house they were using as a forward base. His finger traced the contours of Diablo Canyon. "Here, here, and here," he pointed. "Perfect positions for their observation. And perfect killing grounds for us." The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. "Killing federal agents will bring heat we don't need." El Cuchillo's hand moved so fast the lieutenant didn't register the blow until he was on his knees, blood pouring from his nose. "The Americans have interfered with our business for too long," El Cuchillo said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Today, we send a message. No witnesses, no survivors." As dusk approached, Miguel's team moved into position, 3 vehicles taking separate routes to their observation points. In the lead vehicle, Miguel drove while Sarah maintained radio contact with the other teams. "Team 2 in position," came Diana's voice over the secure channel. "Team 3 moving to final approach," Wilson reported moments later. Miguel guided their SUV off the main trail onto a rough track leading to the canyon overlook. The setting sun cast long shadows across the landscape, transforming the beautiful desert into something ominous. "Maintain radio discipline from here," Miguel instructed as they reached their position. "Observation only until the package is confirmed." They established their post on a rocky outcropping with a clear view of the canyon floor. The thermal imaging equipment was set up, and Sarah began methodically scanning the terrain below. Minutes stretched into hours as darkness fully enveloped the desert. The radio remained quiet, each team maintaining their vigilant watch. "Movement," Sarah whispered suddenly, adjusting the thermal scope. 3 vehicles approaching from the south, heavy heat signatures, armed personnel. Miguel keyed his radio once. The predetermined signal for initial contact. 2 clicks came in response from the other teams. Stopping at the midpoint, Sarah continued. Personnel disembarking. Count 8, 10, 12 individuals. All armed. Miguel frowned. This wasn't the transport configuration they'd expected. Any sign of the package? The scientists or children? Sarah continued scanning. Negative. No smaller signatures, no civilians evident. Just armed personnel. She paused. Miguel, they're spreading out, taking defensive positions. An icy realization spread through Miguel's chest. It's a trap. At that precise moment, something whistled through the air, landing with a metallic clunk near their position. Before either could react, the flashbang grenade detonated, temporarily blinding and disorienting them. Through the ringing in his ears, Miguel heard the first shots being fired, not from the canyon floor, but from positions behind them. Somehow, the cartel had outflanked them, positioning shooters on their exit route. Contact, he shouted into his radio, drawing his weapon. We're taking fire from the rear. All teams, emergency extraction. Static answered him as bullets tore through their vehicle. Sarah recovered enough to return fire, providing cover, as Miguel tried again to reach the other teams. Team 2, Team 3, report! This time, Diana's voice broke through, punctuated by gunfire. Heavy contact! We're pinned down! Wilson shit! The radio erupted with Wilson's voice. Set up! They knew we were coming! Multiple shooters! High ground! Miguel grabbed Sarah by the vest, pulling her down as rounds impacted inches from her head. We need to move! Now! They abandoned their position, staying low and moving toward the minimal cover provided by their bullet-riddled vehicle. The ambush had been perfectly executed. They were isolated, outgunned, and caught in a crossfire with limited escape options. As they reached the SUV, the radio crackled again with Thomas's panicked voice. They're everywhere! We can't… His transmission cut off abruptly. Sarah met Miguel's eyes, the reality of their situation reflected in both their faces. The operation had gone catastrophically wrong in seconds. Mayday! Mayday! Miguel transmitted on the emergency channel. Agents under attack at Diablo Canyon. Multiple shooters, coordinated ambush. Need immediate assistance and air support. The response came not from dispatch, but from Diana, her voice tense but controlled. We're moving to your position. Wilson's mobile but losing blood. Thomas is unresponsive. Miguel made a split-second decision. Negative. Rally at the canyon floor. The vehicles are compromised. We need cover and consolidation. As if to emphasize his point, their SUV's gas tank erupted in flames as tracer rounds found their mark. The heat pushed them back as the vehicle became an inferno. Moving to canyon floor, Miguel confirmed, grabbing essential gear. Sarah, cover our 6. They began their desperate retreat, bullets kicking up dust around them as they scrambled down the rocky slope toward the canyon bottom. Above them, dark figures moved against the night sky, cartel gunmen advancing on their position. The inciting incident had occurred, irrevocably altering their world and thrusting them into a fight for survival against an enemy who had anticipated their every move. There would be no going back to the normalcy of morning coffee and routine patrols. Only forward into the heart of violence. Miguel and Sarah half slid, half ran down the steep canyon slope, loose rocks tumbling beneath their boots. Gunfire continued. Above them, the muzzle flashes briefly illuminating their pursuers against the night sky. Cover! Miguel shouted as they reached the canyon floor, pulling Sarah behind a large boulder. Bullets spinged off stone, sending fragments flying. Sarah winced as a stone shard cut her cheek. Blood trickled down her face as she checked her weapon and counted. Remaining magazines. 2 full, 1 partial, she reported. Miguel's radio crackled. Hernandez. Position. Wounded. Diana's voice broke through the static, barely audible. Diana, say again. Your position. Miguel pressed the receiver closer to his ear. South entrance. Wilson's hit bad. Can't move him further. Miguel scanned the darkness. The south entrance was maybe 300 yards away. 300 yards of exposed terrain with cartel gunmen watching from the ridges. They've got us boxed in, Sarah said, reading his thoughts. They're not trying to escape with their shipment. They want us dead. Sector Command, this is Agent Hernandez. Miguel tried the emergency channel again. We are surrounded at Diablo. Canyon taking heavy fire. Agent Wilson critically wounded. Need immediate support. The response came through broken, but clear enough. Copy your mayday. Air support. 20 minutes. We don't have 20 minutes, Sarah muttered. A new voice cut through the radio. Thomas. Miguel. They missed me. I'm still at observation post 3. Hope surged through Miguel. Status. Hidden. They think I'm dead. I can see 8, maybe 10 gunmen moving into the canyon. Military gear. Former Mexican Special Forces, I think. Thomas's voice was barely above a whisper. They're hunting you, systematically. Can you make it to the vehicles? Miguel asked. Negative. They've positioned shooters to watch the approach. Miguel made a quick decision. Stay hidden. If you get a chance to slip away, take it. If not, at least we have eyes above. More gunfire erupted, closer now, followed by Diana's voice. They're closing in. South entrance compromised. We need to reach them, Sarah said, checking her sidearm. Miguel nodded grimly. Moving from cover to cover. I'll advance. You provide suppressing fire, then leapfrog past me. Understood. Sarah nodded, her face set with determination despite the fear evident in her eyes. Ready. Go. Miguel sprinted from behind the boulder toward a depression in the canyon floor 10 yards ahead. Sarah rose enough to fire 3 controlled shots at the ridgeline, forcing the cartel gunman to duck. The moment Miguel reached cover, he signaled, and Sarah ran while he provided covering fire. They repeated this perilous dance across 150 yards of exposed terrain before gunfire from ahead halted their progress, not from the ridges this time, but from the canyon floor itself. They're between us and Diana, Sarah hissed, pressing herself against the small outcropping that barely shielded them. Through the darkness, Miguel could make out muzzle flashes in the distance, Diana, and possibly Wilson returning fire against advancing cartel members. His radio came to life, but not with Diana's voice. All agents, this is Sector Command. Situation update? We are separated, Miguel reported. Agent Wilson critically wounded, surrounded by approximately 10 Totwelve hostiles with tactical experience, trapped in Diablo Canyon with limited ammunition. Copy. That. Air support inbound, 18 minutes out. Marine Quick Reaction Force being scrambled from Fort Huachuca. We won't last 18 minutes, sir, Miguel replied, his voice steady despite the dire assessment. The radio went silent for a moment. Then, Special Capabilities Team was already en route for the original operation, diverting them to your position. ETA 9 minutes. Designate landing zone if possible. Miguel and Sarah exchanged a look. Special capabilities could mean only one thing: military support beyond the typical border patrol backup. Roger that, Miguel responded. No clear LZ currently available. Canyon is hot from all sides. As if to emphasize his point, bullets struck near their position, showering them with dirt and rock fragments. Sarah returned fire, her shots measured and precise. Situation compromised, came the response. Special Capabilities Team will deploy regardless. Hold position if possible. Miguel switched to the local channel. Diana, we're pinned down. Backup is coming, but we need to hold 49 minutes. Do. You copy? Only static answered him. Thomas, do you have eyes on Diana and Wilson? After a tense pause. Affirmative. They're behind a rock formation near the south entrance. I count 3 cartel members closing on their position from the west. Wilson appears non-responsive. Miguel closed his eyes briefly, calculating impossible odds. 9 minutes. They needed to create a diversion to draw fire away from Diana and Wilson. Sarah, we need to move west, make noise, pull them toward us. Her eyes widened. That's suicide. That's the job, he replied simply. On 3. She took a deep breath, then nodded. On 3. The distraction worked, too well. Miguel and Sarah found themselves running for their lives, pursued by at least 5 cartel gunmen, who had broken off from Diana's position to chase the new targets. In here, Miguel hissed, pulling Sarah into a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. They pressed themselves deep into the shadow as footsteps and Spanish voices approached. Can't have gone far, one man said, his voice carrying in the night air. Check the rocks. El Cuchillo wants them alive if possible, another responded. Sarah's eyes met Miguel's in the darkness. Alive. That was worse than being killed outright. El Cuchillo's reputation for interrogation was legendary. Miguel indicated for Sarah to stay put, then carefully drew his combat knife. The footsteps grew closer, a flashlight beam sweeping the ground near their hiding spot. Sarah held her breath as the light passed inches from their position. then returned. The beam held steady as the cartel gunmen sensed something wasn't right. Miguel moved with decisive efficiency. His hand shot out, grabbing the man's weapon and forcing it upward, while his other hand drove the knife into the attacker's throat. A quick, silent kill. He pulled the body into the crevice before it could fall. "Check over there," another voice called, still too close. Sarah tapped Miguel's shoulder and pointed to herself, then toward the sound of the voice. He nodded reluctantly. Sarah slipped out of the crevice, staying low, using the darkness as cover. Miguel watched her silhouette disappear around a boulder, his heart pounding with anxiety. Seconds later, a muffled struggle, then silence. Sarah reappeared, her face grim but determined, and gave him a thumbs up. "Two down," she whispered as she rejoined him. "But they'll be missed soon." Miguel checked his watch. 6 minutes until support arrives. The radio suddenly came alive with Tomas's urgent voice. "Miguel, 3 vehicles entering the canyon from the north entrance. Heavy weapons." Miguel's heart sank. Reinforcements, but not for them. Description: SUVs, blacked out. Looks like... Oh God, what is it? It's him. El Cuchillo. I can see him directing men from the middle vehicle. Miguel exchanged a look with Sarah. The situation had just gone from desperate to catastrophic. New priority, Miguel decided. We need to reach Diana and Wilson, consolidate what ammunition we have left, and find defensible ground. As they prepared to move, Diana's voice finally broke through the static. "Miguel, are you there?" Her voice was tight with pain. "We're here. Status?" "Wilson's gone," she replied, her voice cracking slightly. "Bled out 5 minutes ago. I'm hit in the leg, can't put weight on it. 3 tangos down on my position." Miguel closed his eyes briefly. Wilson, the veteran who had survived everything the border could throw at him for 20 years, gone. "Stay put," he ordered Diana. "We're coming to you." They moved more carefully now, knowing that El Cuchillo's arrival meant more gunmen and more sophisticated tactics. The canyon floor offered minimal cover, forcing them to stay close to the western wall, using shadows and rock formations to mask their approach. They were halfway to Diana's position when gunfire erupted again, not aimed at them, but at Diana. "They found her," Sarah said, breaking into a run despite the danger. Miguel followed, no longer concerned with stealth. As they rounded a bend in the canyon, they saw Diana's position, a small rock outcropping, under fire from multiple directions. She was returning shots sparingly, clearly conserving ammunition. "Cover me," Miguel said, then sprinted toward a position that would give him a line of sight on Diana's attackers. Sarah immediately opened fire, forcing the cartel gunman to seek cover. Miguel reached his destination and added his weapon to the fight, creating a crossfire that momentarily confused the attackers. Diana seized the opportunity, firing with precision at the nearest gunman, dropping him with a headshot. For a moment, it seemed they might gain the upper hand. Then the radio crackled again with Thomas's panicked voice. "They found me! They're—" His transmission cut off in a burst of gunfire. Miguel's blood ran cold. Tomas had been their only eyes above, their only advance warning system. "We need to move! Now!" he shouted to Diana. But she shook her head. "Can't run on this. Leg, you two go. I'll cover you." "Not happening," Sarah replied fiercely. "We all go, or none of us do." Miguel checked his watch again. 4 minutes. We just need to hold 4 more minutes. A new sound reached them, the mechanical clacking of a mounted heavy weapon being prepared. Miguel recognized it instantly. "Down," he yelled, diving toward Diana as the M240 machine gun opened fire from the ridge. The heavy 7.62mm rounds chewed through rock and dirt around them, creating a storm of deadly fragments. Miguel pulled Diana behind the meager cover of Wilson's body, a final service from their fallen comrade. Sarah crawled to join them, blood streaming from fresh cuts on her arms, where stone fragments had sliced through her uniform. "That wasn't here before," she gasped. "Reinforcements," Miguel confirmed grimly. "They brought up heavy weapons." The machine gun fell silent, likely repositioning for a better angle. In the momentary lull, Miguel assessed their situation. They were pinned in a depression with minimal cover, one agent dead, another severely wounded and completely outgunned. Their only hope was the promised support arriving in, he checked again, 3 minutes and 20 seconds. The radio suddenly came alive, not with a familiar voice, but with a new one. Cold, accented, and chillingly calm. "Border Patrol agents," the voice said in perfect English. "This is Joaquin Velasquez. You know me as El Cuchillo." Miguel felt Diana stiffen beside him. "Your situation is hopeless," El Cuchillo continued. "But I am not without mercy. Surrender now, and I will allow one of you to leave alive to deliver a message to your superiors. Resist, and you will die slowly." Miguel looked at Sarah, then Diana. No words were needed. Surrender wasn't an option. Not to this man. "We know about the scientists," Miguel replied into the radio. "We know about the children. Did you really think we came alone?" A pause, then El Cuchillo's voice, slightly less confident. "You bluff. Your reinforcements are too far away." "Check your perimeter," Miguel responded, gambling everything on the promised support. "Check the ridges." Another pause, longer this time. Miguel could almost feel El Cuchillo's uncertainty through the radio. 2 minutes, Sarah whispered, glancing at her watch. El Cuchillo's voice returned, all pretense of civility gone. "Kill them all." The machine gun opened up again, joined by rifle fire from multiple positions. Their tiny pocket of safety began to disintegrate under the barrage. "Final stand," Miguel said simply, meeting the eyes of his colleagues. They nodded, understanding. They broke cover simultaneously, firing at different targets, a choreographed burst of defiance against overwhelming odds. 2 cartel gunmen fell immediately, surprised by the sudden counterattack. For a brief, glorious moment, the agents controlled the engagement through sheer audacity. Then reality reasserted itself as return fire intensified. Diana cried out, struck in the shoulder, spinning her back into the depression. Sarah was hit next, a round grazing her side, tearing through uniform and flesh. She dropped to one knee, but continued firing. Miguel felt a bullet tug at his sleeve, then another strike his tactical vest, knocking the wind from him. He staggered, but remained standing, emptying his magazine at the muzzle flashes surrounding. "Them! Last mag!" he gasped, reloading with trembling hands. Sarah nodded grimly. "Make them count." In that moment, a new sound cut through the gunfire. The unmistakable thump, thump, thump of helicopter rotors approaching rapidly. "There!" Diana pointed skyward, where a dark shape blotted out the stars, moving fast and low. Hope surged through Miguel's chest, then immediately died as he realized what was coming. "Get down!" he shouted. They brought air support, but the helicopter didn't open fire on their position. Instead, its spotlights suddenly illuminated the ridgeline, where the machine gun had been devastating them. A second later, tracer rounds streaked from the helicopter toward the cartel positions. That's not them, Sarah realized, her voice filled with disbelief and sudden hope. The radio crackled to life. "Border Patrol agents, this is Sierra Actual. Marine Special Operations inbound. Mark your position. Over." "They're here," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Miguel fumbled for the emergency flare on his belt, his hands shaking with adrenaline and fatigue. "Get ready. When I pop this, all hell's going to break loose." More than it already has? Diana managed a tight smile despite her wounds. Miguel couldn't help but return it. Fair point. He triggered the flare, sending a bright red star into the night sky above their position. The helicopter immediately adjusted course, moving to provide cover directly over them. A voice crackled through their radio. "Border Patrol, we have you. Marked. Stand by." The aircraft didn't attempt to land. Instead, ropes unfurled from its sides, and dark figures began fast roping down to positions surrounding the agents. Move silently. Strike suddenly. The Marine approach. The suppressive fire from the helicopter kept the cartel gunmen pinned down, unable to target the descending operators. Within seconds, 4 Marines in full combat gear had formed a protective perimeter around the wounded agents. Supervisory Agent Hernandez? One approached, his face obscured by night vision goggles and tactical gear. Miguel nodded. 3 survivors. 1 KIA, Agent Wilson. The Marine nodded grimly. "Master Sergeant Rivera, Marine Special Operations. Medevac inbound 2 minutes. We need to move you to the extraction point." "There are too many of them," Sarah protested weakly. "And El Cuchillo is here personally." "We know," Rivera replied calmly. 4 more of my team deployed to the ridges during our approach. Snipers. They're already in position." As if to confirm his words, a shot rang out from the canyon rim, followed by another. Not the rapid fire of combat, but the deliberate, measured shots of precision marksmen. "Tango down." a voice reported through Rivera's radio. Moving to secondary. Targets. Rivera turned to his team. Jackson, Peters, get these agents ready to move. Collins, maintain perimeter security. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency, quickly assessing the wounded. Miguel watched in amazement as they applied combat tourniquets and pressure dressings, administered pain management, and prepared improvised stretchers in seconds. Sir, one Marine addressed Miguel. Secondary extraction team reports they've found another agent, still alive but critical. Possible Agent Mendoza based on your team roster. Tomas? Diana gasped. He's alive. Barely, the Marine replied. They're bringing him in now. The canyon that had been a death trap minutes ago was transforming into a coordinated military operation zone. Miguel felt a surreal sense of detachment as more helicopters arrived, their rotors chopping through the night air. Rivera knelt beside Miguel. We need to move now. El Cuchillo is attempting to rally his forces for a counterattack. How did you get here so fast? Miguel asked as the Marine helped him to his feet. We were already inbound for the original operation. Rivera checked his weapon. Joint Task Force was always part of the plan. Your chief was backing you up more than you knew. A realization struck Miguel. The scientists, the children. Was that real? Rivera's expression darkened. Very real. That's why we're here. El Cuchillo's operation was on our radar for weeks. Your team was supposed to be surveillance only, well away from the action. What went wrong? Someone talked. Intel was compromised. Rivera's voice hardened. We'll find out who. Before Miguel could respond, shots erupted from the north end of the canyon, not precision sniper fire, but the rapid staccato of close combat. Sierra 2 report, Rivera demanded into his radio. Heavy contact, came the tense reply. El Cuchillo is attempting to exfil with a package. Multiple vehicles, heavily armed. Rivera didn't hesitate. Sierra 3 and 4, maintain position and continue overwatch. Sierra 2, delay but do not engage directly. I'm inbound with Sierra 1. He turned to the other Marines. Extraction team has these agents. We're moving to intercept the package. The wounded agents were being loaded into a medevac helicopter that had touched down in the clearing. Miguel watched as Sarah and Diana were secured. Then Tomas, barely recognizable through his injuries, was rushed on board. Miguel pulled away from the medic supporting him. I'm coming with you. Rivera shook his head. Negative. You're wounded and... This is my operation. Miguel cut him off. My team. My responsibility. He checked his sidearm. And I can still shoot. The Marine studied him for a moment, then nodded sharply. Stay behind me. Follow orders instantly, or I'll have you sedated and loaded on that chopper. Clear? Crystal. As the medevac lifted off with the wounded agents, Miguel joined Rivera's team moving rapidly toward the north end of the canyon. DK. Marines moved with fluid precision, covering each other's advances, communicating with hand signals and occasional radio bursts. The adrenaline pushed back Miguel's pain and fatigue as they approached the sound of gunfire. Ahead, he could see muzzle flashes illuminating a standoff between Marines and cartel gunmen, using vehicles as cover. Sierra 2, status. Rivera whispered into his radio. 3 tangos down. 4 more in defensive positions around the vehicles. High-value target in the middle SUV with 2 close protection. The package. Confirmed. 2 adults, 2 minors, non-combatants. Rivera turned to his team. Plan Bravo. Disable vehicles, isolate HVT, extract package. He glanced at Miguel. Stay. With Collins. Miguel nodded, positioning himself behind the Marine indicated. The team spread out, moving to encircle the cartel's position. All Sierra elements, Rivera's voice came over the radio. Execute in 3, 2, 1, simultaneous. Precision shots rang out from multiple directions. The cartel vehicle's tires exploded as rounds struck them, followed by shots that disabled engines with surgical precision. The Marines advanced, firing suppressive bursts that forced the cartel gunmen into cover. One tried to break for open ground, and was immediately cut down. Through the chaos, Miguel caught sight of a figure moving between vehicles. Tall, elegant, despite the situation, with the confident bearing of authority. El Cuchillo. Target spotted, Miguel said to Collins. Moving to middle vehicle. The Marine nodded, adjusting his position to provide cover. Miguel advanced carefully, using the disabled vehicles for concealment. He could hear El Cuchillo shouting orders in Spanish, directing his remaining men to form a tighter perimeter around the SUV. Miguel peered around the hood of a truck and finally got a clear view of the man he had heard so much about, but never seen. Joaquin Velasquez was not what he expected. Not a hulking brute, but a slender, almost scholarly-looking man in his 50s, his silver hair neatly combed despite the combat around him. The only thing that matched his reputation was his eyes. Cold, assessing, utterly without mercy. And at that moment, those eyes locked with Miguel's. El Cuchillo smiled, a gesture entirely disconnected from any human warmth, and raised his hand, revealing not a gun, but a remote detonator. Miguel's blood froze. "Bomb!" he shouted into his radio. "He's got a—" El Cuchillo pressed the button, his smile never wavering. Nothing happened. The cartel leader's expression shifted from confidence to confusion, then rage as he pressed the button repeatedly. He turned to shout at one of his men, momentarily forgetting Miguel. It was the opening he needed. Miguel stepped out from cover and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. The first struck El Cuchillo in the shoulder, spinning him. The second hit center mass, doubling him over. The third caught him in the throat as he fell. Time seemed to slow as the notorious cartel enforcer collapsed to his knees, his cold eyes still fixed on Miguel's in disbelief. Then he toppled forward, face first into the desert soil. A sudden silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the approaching sound of the Marines securing their remaining cartel members. Rivera appeared at Miguel's side, his weapon trained on El Cuchillo's motionless form. "Good shooting!" Miguel lowered his sidearm, suddenly aware of the trembling in his hands. "The detonator jammed frequencies the moment we arrived," Rivera explained. "Standard procedure." Miguel nodded numbly, the adrenaline draining from his system. The pain of his injuries returned with crushing force, nearly buckling his knees. Rivera caught him. "Medic! We need a medic here!" As a Marine corpsman rushed to his side, Miguel's gaze drifted to the middle SUV, where other operators were helping 4 figures from the back seat, 2 adults in civilian clothes, and 2 children, a boy and a girl, perhaps 10 years old. "The scientists?" Miguel managed. Rivera nodded. "Biotechnology specialists, kidnapped from their lab in Switzerland 3 weeks ago." "And the children?" Rivera's expression darkened. "Special. Different. That's all you need to know." As Miguel was lowered onto a stretcher, he caught a final glimpse of the children being led to a separate helicopter. The girl turned, seeming to look directly at him. Though too far away to see clearly, he had the unsettling feeling she was not simply looking at him, but into him. Then the corpsman administered something to his IV, and darkness claimed him. Miguel drifted in and out of consciousness, fragments of conversation filtering through the haze of pain medication. Not standard cartel tactics. Third-party involvement. Need to debrief him before. He finally awoke fully in a private hospital room, the steady beep of monitors his only companion. The blinds were drawn against the harsh Arizona sun, but thin strips of light indicated it was daytime. Attempting to sit up, Miguel winced as pain radiated from his side where the bullet had impacted his vest, leaving deep bruising but no penetrating wound. His various cuts and abrasions had been cleaned and bandaged. The door opened, and Chief Prescott entered, looking haggard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally immaculate uniform was wrinkled, as if he'd been wearing it for days. "Welcome back," Prescott said, approaching the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot," Miguel replied dryly. "My team?" "Stable. Agent Keller has a minor wound to her side and multiple lacerations. Agent Reyes underwent surgery for her shoulder and leg injuries, but is recovering well." Prescott paused. "Mendoza is still in intensive care. It's touch and go." Miguel nodded, absorbing the information. "Wilson?" "Being transported home to his family. Full honors." A moment of silence passed between them, the weight of loss palpable in the sterile room. "The operation?" Miguel finally asked. Prescott's expression shifted subtly. "Successful, given the circumstances. The scientists and children are secure." "Who were they?" "Rivera wouldn't tell me." Prescott glanced at the door, then back at Miguel. "Dr. Anton Richter and Dr. Elise Moreau, leading geneticists specializing in rare conditions. They were kidnapped 3 weeks ago from their research facility in Geneva." "And the children?" Prescott hesitated. "Special cases. Their genetic makeup is unusual." "Unusual how?" "That's classified above both our pay grades." Miguel studied his superior. After 15 years, He could read the subtle tells, the tightness around Prescott's eyes, the slight tension in his shoulders. "You're not telling me everything." Prescott sighed heavily. "There are aspects of this operation that remain need to know." "My team almost died out there." Miguel's voice hardened. "Wilson did die. I think we've earned the right to know. Some things are bigger than—" The door opened again, interrupting their conversation. A woman in a dark suit entered, her bearing immediately identifying her as Federal, though not Border Patrol. She was followed by Master Sergeant Rivera, now in clean combat utilities rather than full tactical gear. "Agent Hernandez," the woman greeted him without warmth. "I'm Special Agent Karen Voss, Department of Homeland Security. I need to speak with you privately." Prescott looked like he wanted to object, but simply nodded and left the room. Voss took the chair beside Miguel's bed, while Rivera remained standing, near the door. "I understand you have questions," Voss began without preamble. "Before I address them, I need you to understand something. Everything about this operation beyond the basic fact that you intercepted cartel members is classified top secret." "With respect, ma'am," Miguel responded. "My agents didn't nearly die for basic facts. We deserve to know what happened out there." "What happened," Voss said coldly, "is that El Cuchillo was transporting extremely valuable assets for a third party. Your team was surveillance only, intentionally kept apart from the main operation for your own safety. Then why were we ambushed? How did they know exactly where we'd be positioned?" Voss and Rivera exchanged a look that sent ice through Miguel's veins. "We believe," Rivera said carefully, "there was a leak." "From where?" Miguel demanded. "From inside Border Patrol," Voss stated flatly. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Miguel shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. No agent would—" "The evidence suggests otherwise," Voss cut him off. "The cartel knew your exact positions, your capabilities, and your communication protocols. That information could only come from someone with intimate knowledge of the operation." Miguel's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe they intercepted our communications, or the operation details weren't transmitted electronically until minutes before deployment, Rivera interrupted. "Standard counterintelligence protocol." "Which means," Voss continued, "someone physically passed information to El Cuchillo's people." Miguel felt sick. The idea that one of their own had betrayed them, had caused Wilson's death and nearly killed the entire team, was almost inconceivable. "Who?" "That's what we need to determine," Voss replied. "And you're going to help us." Miguel's eyes narrowed. "How?" Voss leaned forward. "By returning to active duty and acting as if nothing is wrong. We'll feed different pieces of information to different individuals, see which details reach the cartel. You want me to spy on my colleagues? My friends? I want you to find the person responsible for Agent Wilson's death," Voss countered sharply. Miguel fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. After a long moment, he asked, "What about the scientists and the children? Who wanted them so badly that El Cuchillo personally handled the transport?" Rivera shifted uncomfortably. Voss maintained her impassive expression, but hesitated just long enough for Miguel to know he'd touched on something significant. "The scientists' research involves genetic anomalies that could have military applications," she finally said, choosing her words carefully. "The children exhibit certain capabilities that make them valuable to various foreign interests." "What capabilities?" Voss stood abruptly. "That's all you need to know for now. Focus on recovering and preparing to help us identify the leak." As she turned to leave, Miguel called after her. "One more thing. El Cuchillo had a detonator. What was he planning to blow up?" Voss paused at the door. "We found explosive devices, planted throughout the canyon. If detonated, they would have collapsed the walls, burying everyone, including his own men." She glanced back at him. "He wasn't just trying to kill your team. He was eliminating witnesses." After she left, Rivera remained, his expression troubled. "There's more, isn't there?" Miguel asked quietly. The Marine hesitated, then moved closer to the bed and lowered his voice. "The children. I've never seen anything like it. During extraction, one of them, the girl, she looked at Martinez, one of my men. He froze completely, then started screaming about spiders crawling under his skin. There were no spiders." Miguel felt a chill. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful, Hernandez. This goes deeper than a cartel moving product. Much deeper." Rivera straightened up. "I've said too much already. Get well soon." After Rivera left, Miguel stared at the ceiling, his mind processing everything he'd learned. A traitor in border patrol, children with unexplainable abilities, foreign interests, eliminated witnesses, each piece pointed to something far more sinister than a typical cartel operation. And now he was being asked to hunt one of his own. 3 days later, Miguel was discharged from the hospital with orders to take 2 weeks' leave before returning to limited duty. He drove directly to the Nogales station instead. The atmosphere changed noticeably when he entered. Conversations halted. Agents cast sidelong glances, and an uncomfortable silence followed him as he made his way to Prescott's office. Word had spread about the ambush, about Wilson's death, about the mysterious rescue by Marine Special Forces. Rumors circulated, each version more elaborate than the last, and beneath it all, an undercurrent of tension, the unspoken question of how El Cuchillo had known exactly where to strike. Prescott looked up in surprise as Miguel entered without knocking. "You should be resting. I need to see the duty roster." "From that night," Miguel replied, ignoring the comment, "and the logs showing who accessed the operation briefing materials." Prescott's expression hardened. "Voss got to you. Wilson is dead. My team nearly joined him. I want answers." After a moment's hesitation, Prescott nodded and pulled up the files on his computer, turning the screen so Miguel could see. 27 people had knowledge of the operation, Prescott said quietly, including me. Miguel scanned the list, recognizing most names: senior agents, support staff, communications specialists, intelligence analysts. Who had access to the exact positioning? "Details," he asked. "Just 7, the tactical planning team, you and me." Miguel committed the 5 other names to memory. All were experienced agents he'd worked with for years. All were people he'd trusted with his life before. "I need to see my team," Miguel said, standing. "They're not here," Prescott replied. "Keller and Reyes are still on medical leave. And Mendoza, transferred to a specialized facility in Virginia yesterday. His condition stabilized enough for transport." Miguel frowned. "Virginia? Why not keep him here?" "Orders from above. Given his injuries, they wanted him at a military medical center with advanced trauma capabilities." Something felt off about that explanation, but Miguel couldn't place why. He filed it away for later consideration. "I want to see the after-action reports," he said. "All of them," Prescott shook his head. "Those have been classified. DHS has taken over the investigation. This was our operation, not anymore." Prescott looked genuinely regretful. "Miguel, take the leave. Heal. Let the professionals handle this." "We are the professionals," Miguel replied tersely, turning to leave. "Hernandez," Prescott called after him. When Miguel paused, he added, "Be careful what rocks you turn over. Not everything is as straightforward as it seems." The warning lingered in Miguel's mind as he drove to Sarah's apartment. She answered the door with her arm in a sling, bruises still visible on her face but healing. "You should be resting," she said, echoing Prescott. But her smile conveyed genuine relief at seeing him. "So should you," he replied, following her inside. "How are you really?" "Better than Reyes. Better than Thomas." She gestured toward her couch, where case files were spread across the coffee table. "Better enough to be doing some research." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "On what?" "El Cuchillo, the scientists. Everything about that night." She sat down carefully, mindful of her injuries. "Something doesn't add up." "No," Miguel agreed, joining her. "It doesn't." He filled her in on his conversations with Voss and Rivera, watching her reaction carefully. Sarah had been with the Nogales station less than a year. He hated the suspicion that crept into his mind, but Voss's words had planted a seed he couldn't ignore. "A mole," Sarah repeated, her expression darkening. "That would explain how they knew exactly where to heat us." "The question is who," Miguel said, "and why." "I've been looking into El Cuchillo's recent activities," Sarah indicated the files. "There's a pattern of unusual behavior over the past 6 months. Meetings with people outside his normal circles. Travel to locations with no apparent cartel connections." Miguel leafed through the intelligence reports. "Where did you get these?" "I still have contacts at Northern Border Intelligence. Called in some favors." She pointed to a particular report. "This meeting in Vancouver 3 months ago. El Cuchillo met with a man identified as Anton Karlov." "The Russian?" Sarah nodded. "Former FSB, now private security consultant for various international clients. What would El Cuchillo want with an ex-Russian intelligence officer? That's the question, isn't it? Sarah leaned forward. Miguel, I don't think this was about drugs or typical cartel business. The scientists, the children, this was something else entirely. Miguel thought about what Rivera had told him about the girl and the spiders. Have you found anything about the children? Sarah hesitated, then reached for her laptop. Nothing official, but there are rumors in certain circles about air search program in Geneva, studying children with unusual neurological patterns. She pulled up an encrypted message board, scrolling through discussions about enhanced cognitive abilities and next-generation human development. This is fringe stuff, Miguel said skeptically. Most of it, yes, but look at these posts. She highlighted several entries from a user named Cassandra, specific details about the Geneva facility, names of researchers that match our scientists, references to subjects being relocated due to security concerns 3 weeks ago. The timing aligned perfectly with the kidnapping. Who is this Cassandra? Unknown, but whoever they are, they have inside knowledge. Sarah closed the laptop. I think someone wanted those children for their abilities, whatever they might be. They used El Cuchillo as the middleman for extraction and transport. But why bring them through the most heavily patrolled border in the world? Sarah shrugged, then winced at the movement. Maybe they didn't have a choice. Maybe time was a factor. Miguel's phone buzzed, a text from Rivera. Need to meet. Private. Usual place. 2 hours, he frowned. There was no usual place between him and Rivera. What is it? Sarah asked, noting his expression. Nothing, Miguel lied, pocketing the phone. Just the doctor reminding me about medication. Something wasn't right. Either Rivera was setting up a confidential meeting location, or someone was using his identity to make contact. I should let you rest, Miguel said, standing. Is there anything you need? Sarah shook her head. Just answers. I'm working on it, he promised. Keep digging, but be careful. If there is a mole, they might be watching all of us. As he left Sarah's apartment, Miguel noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street. It hadn't been there when he arrived. He memorized the plate number and continued to his truck, acting as if he hadn't noticed anything unusual. Instead of heading home, Miguel drove to a shopping center, parked, and entered through one entrance, then immediately exited through another, watching for tails. Satisfied he wasn't being followed, he drove to a dinner on the outskirts of town, a place he and Rivera had never been, but that offered good visibility and multiple exits. He arrived early, selected a booth with a clear view of the entrance, and waited, his sidearm accessible beneath his jacket. 20 minutes later, Rivera entered, alone and in civilian clothes. He scanned the diner before approaching Miguel's booth. You got my message, he said, sliding in across from Miguel. Someone did, Miguel replied. How did you get my number? Voss, Rivera admitted. But this meeting isn't sanctioned. Why the cloak and dagger? Rivera leaned forward, keeping his voice low. Because I don't trust DHS. Something about this operation stinks, and it's not just a mole in Border Patrol. Miguel studied the Marine's face, looking for deception and finding only concern. What's going on? Your agent, Mendoza. His transfer wasn't medical necessity. He was conscious before they moved him, asking questions about what he saw in the canyon, which was, I don't know exactly. But after he spoke to Voss, she ordered him sedated and transported to a DHS facility, not a military hospital as they're claiming. Miguel felt his suspicions crystallizing into something darker. Why are you telling me this? Because my men and I were used, Rivera said bitterly. We were told this was a rescue operation for kidnapped scientists and children at risk. Now, I'm hearing whispers this was an asset recovery mission, not a rescue. Assets? The children? Rivera nodded grimly. 2 of my men are experiencing symptoms since the extraction. Headaches, nightmares, auditory hallucinations. Both had direct contact with the girl. Miguel remembered what Rivera had told him about the spiders. What is she? I don't know, but it's why everyone wants her. Rivera slid a flash drive across the table. This contains encrypted files I pulled from Voss's laptop while she was briefing my commander. I can't access them, but maybe you know someone who can. Miguel pocketed the drive. This could end your career. Or save lives, Rivera countered. Something is wrong here, Hernandez. These aren't just special children, and this wasn't just a cartel operation gone wrong. The mole, Miguel began. I think you should look closer to the top, Rivera interrupted, his eyes conveying a message his words couldn't. Much closer. Before Miguel could respond, Rivera's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. I need to go. Be careful who you trust. After Rivera left, Miguel remained in the booth, processing everything he'd learned. The pieces were aligning into a disturbing picture, one that suggested the betrayal might be far more complex than a simple leak. He pulled out his phone to call Sarah, then hesitated. If there really was a mole at the highest levels, any communication might be monitored. As he debated his next move, the diner's television caught his attention. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Border Patrol agent found dead in apparent suicide. Miguel felt his blood freeze as the camera showed a familiar apartment building. Sarah's building. He stood abruptly, throwing cash on the table, and ran for his truck. By the time he arrived, the area was already cordoned off with police tape. Emergency vehicles crowded the street, their lights painting the gathering dusk in alternating red and blue. Miguel flashed his badge to the officer at the perimeter. Border Patrol. What happened? The officer looked uncomfortable. Agent Sarah Keller. Gunshot wound to the head, service weapon still in hand. That's impossible, Miguel said, his voice hollow. I was just with her 2 hours ago. Sir, you should speak with the detective in charge. Miguel pushed past him, ignoring the protests, and entered the building. He took the stairs 2 at a time to Sarah's third-floor apartment, his heart pounding against his ribs. Detective Laura Sandoval met him at the apartment door, blocking his entry. Agent Hernandez, I was told you might show up. I need to see her, Miguel demanded. That's not possible right now. Sandoval's expression was professionally sympathetic but firm. When was the last time you saw Agent Keller? 2 hours ago. She wasn't suicidal. She was investigating what happened in the canyon. Something flickered in Sandoval's eyes. You should know that we found a note. She mentioned feeling responsible for the ambush that killed Agent Wilson. That's bullshit, Miguel snapped. She was fine when I left her. She was making progress. Progress on what? Miguel hesitated, suddenly wary. The case report, he said vaguely. Look, I knew her. This doesn't make sense. Grief rarely does, Sandoval replied. I understand you were close to Agent Keller. The implication wasn't subtle. Miguel felt a surge of anger. She was my colleague and my friend, and she didn't kill herself. The evidence suggests otherwise. What evidence? The perfectly placed weapon? The convenient suicide note? Miguel stepped closer. Who found her? Anonymous call to 911. Let me see the body. Sandoval sighed. Agent Hernandez, you're not thinking clearly. Go home. Get some rest. We'll continue this conversation when you're in a more reasonable state of mind. As they spoke, 2 men in dark suits emerged from Sarah's apartment, carrying evidence bags. They nodded to Sandoval and left without acknowledging Miguel. Who are they? Miguel demanded. This is a local police matter. Federal interest, Sandoval replied vaguely. Given Agent Keller's position. Miguel watched the men disappear down the hallway, a cold certainty forming in his gut. This wasn't a suicide investigation. It was a cleanup operation. Detective, he said carefully, I'd like your card. For when I'm more reasonable. Sandoval seemed relieved at his apparent cooperation and handed him her business card. Get some rest, Agent Hernandez, and I'm sorry for your loss. Miguel nodded and walked away, his mind racing. Sarah had been murdered. He was certain of it. She'd found something in her research, something significant enough to silence her. As he reached his truck, he noticed the same black SUV from earlier parked down the street. No coincidence. Instead of heading home, Miguel drove to a small motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash for a room, and locked himself inside. He pulled out Rivera's flash drive and stared at it, knowing it likely contained the same information that had gotten Sarah killed. His phone rang, Chief Prescott's number. Miguel let it go to voicemail. Then another call, from an unknown number. Then a text message from Prescott. Need to meet immediately. Security concern. Miguel turned off his phone and removed the battery. Then he powered up the burner phone. He kept for emergencies, and made a single call to the one person outside of Border Patrol he knew he could trust. "Diana," he said when she answered. "Sarah's dead. Don't go home. Don't go to the station. I'll pick you up in 30 minutes. He gave her the address of a 24-hour diner 10 miles away. "Tell no one." "Miguel, what's happening?" Diana's voice was tense with pain and confusion. "I don't know yet," he replied honestly. "But I'm going to find out, and when I do, someone's going to pay." As he ended the call, Miguel caught a glimpse of his reflection in the motel room mirror. The man staring back at him was no longer just a Border Patrol agent. He was a hunter, tracking the most dangerous prey of all, traitors hiding behind badges and authority. The midpoint twist had arrived. Everything he thought he knew about the operation, about his colleagues, about his mission, was unraveling, and at the center of it all were two children with abilities that powerful people would kill to control. The real battle was just beginning. Diana winced as she slid into the booth opposite Miguel, her injured leg still causing her obvious pain. The 24-hour diner was nearly empty at this late hour, just a trucker at the counter and an elderly couple in the far corner. "Sarah's dead?" Diana asked without preamble, her voice barely above a whisper. Miguel nodded grimly. "They're calling it suicide." "That's impossible. I spoke to her yesterday. She was focused, determined. Someone wanted her quiet." Miguel slid a piece of paper across the table. On it, he'd written, "They're probably listening. Be careful what you say." Diana read it, her eyes widening slightly before she composed herself. "What's our next move, then? We need to access what she found," Miguel said, keeping his voice measured while writing another note. "Do you know anyone who can decrypt secured files?" Diana's expression remained neutral as she read. Then she replied, "Maybe we should consult Wilson's notes." He was always thorough. It took Miguel a moment to catch her meaning. Wilson hadn't left notes. He was dead before the operation even concluded. But Wilson's son was a cybersecurity specialist who had occasionally helped the team, unofficially. "Good idea," Miguel nodded, "but we'll need to be discreet." A waitress approached, and they fell silent, ordering coffee they didn't want. When she left, Diana leaned forward. "How deep does this go?" she asked quietly. Miguel thought about Voss, about Prescott's warnings, about the men in suits at Sarah's apartment. "All the way to the top, I think." His burner phone vibrated. The text was from an unknown number. "Stop. Digging if you want to live. Final warning." He showed it to Diana, whose face hardened. "They found us already. They're tracking us somehow." Miguel scanned the diner, looking for anyone suspicious, anyone paying too much attention. Nothing seemed out of place, but the sense of being watched had intensified. "We need to move," he decided, leaving cash on the table. "My truck might be compromised." They exited through the kitchen despite protests from the staff, Miguel using his badge to quiet them. The backlot was poorly lit, but Miguel could make out two vehicles parked there, a staff member's sedan and an older model pickup that had seen better days. "Wait here," he told Diana, approaching the pickup. Breaking into vehicles wasn't standard Border Patrol training, but his misspent youth before joining the service provided useful skills. Within minutes, he had the truck started. Diana limped over and climbed in, grimacing in pain. "Where to?" "Wilson's son, Scottsdale." The drive took nearly 2 hours, during which they remained vigilant for tails, taking side roads and doubling back several times. They abandoned the stolen pickup 10 blocks from their destination and walked the rest, Diana struggling but refusing assistance. Jacob Wilson lived in a modern apartment complex with good security they bypassed by simply mentioning his father's name to the night guard, who knew them both. When Jacob opened his door, his eyes were red-rimmed with grief. The funeral for his father was still 2 days away. "Miguel? Diana?" His surprise quickly shifted to concern. "What's going on? It's 3 in the morning." "We need your help," Miguel said, glancing down the hallway before adding, "It's about your father." Jacob ushered them inside his apartment, a showcase of technology, multiple monitors, servers humming quietly in the corner, various devices in different stages of disassembly. "You're not here officially," Jacob guessed, studying their tense expressions. "No," Miguel confirmed, removing Rivera's flash drive from his pocket. "We need to know what's on this, urgently." Jacob took the drive, examining it. "Government encryption, probably high level. Where did you get this?" "The less you know, the safer you are," Diana replied. Can you access it? Jacob hesitated, then nodded slowly. For my father, yes, but it will take time. How much time? Hours, maybe the rest of the night. The encryption looks military grade. Miguel checked his watch. We'll wait. As Jacob set to work, Diana pulled Miguel aside. What's the plan after we get the information? Depends what's on the drive. But Sarah died for this, so it must be significant. And if it implicates people in positions of power? Miguel's expression hardened. Then we find someone who'll listen. Someone who can't be bought or intimidated. The hours crawled by. Jacob worked. Methodically, his fingers flying across keyboards, eyes fixed on scrolling code that meant nothing to Miguel. Diana dozed fitfully on the couch while Miguel maintained watch at the window, scanning the street below for any sign of pursuit. Dawn was breaking when Jacob finally called them over. I'm in, but... He hesitated. This is heavy stuff. On the screen were documents, photographs, and video files. Miguel leaned closer, reading the headers of the files. Project Whisper, Human Cognitive Enhancement Trials. Jacob clicked on a document. It's a research program run jointly by DHS and an unnamed intelligence agency. They've been studying children with unusual neurological development. The scientists, Diana realized. They were researchers on this project. Yes, Jacob confirmed, opening another file. Dr. Richter and Dr. Moreau led a team studying children with what they call apex cognitive development, essentially evolved mental capabilities. What kind of capabilities? Miguel asked, though he already suspected the answer based on what Rivera had told him. Jacob pulled up a video file. See for yourself. The footage showed a sterile laboratory setting. A girl of about 10, the same girl Miguel had glimpsed in the canyon, sat at a table across from a researcher. Between them was a simple arrangement of geometric shapes. Subject 7, Trial 36. A voice narrated off-camera. Cognitive influence test. The researcher picked up a cube and placed it in front of the girl. What do you see, Elise? The girl, Elise, stared at the cube without touching it. It's a sphere, she said calmly. No, it's a cube, the researcher corrected gently. Elise continued staring at the object. Look again, it's a sphere. The researcher's expression changed subtly. He blinked, then nodded slowly. Yes, it's a sphere. I'm sorry, I was mistaken. He made a note, then looked up again, confusion crossing his face. Wait, no, it's a cube. Elise's face remained impassive. You're tired. You should rest. The researcher's eyelids immediately drooped. I'm very tired, he mumbled, his head nodding forward. Within seconds, he appeared to be asleep, his head resting on the table. Remarkable, the off-camera voice commented. Trial 36 successful. Subject 7 demonstrates increasing control duration and decreased recovery time in the target. Miguel felt a chill run through him. She can influence perception, make people see things that aren't there, even control basic functions like sleep. The boy too, Jacob said, opening another file. Subject 9. His abilities are different. Precognition. They think. He can anticipate events before they happen. Jesus, Diana whispered. They're weapons, human weapons. And everyone wants them, Miguel realized. Foreign intelligence services, private military contractors, and our own government, Jacob finished, pulling up another document. This is a directive authorizing extraordinary measures to recover the subjects if compromised. Signed by someone high up in DHS, someone named Voss. Miguel's blood ran cold. Karen Voss. She's leading the investigation into the ambush. There's more, Jacob said, his voice strained. According to these files, there was no kidnapping. Richter and Moreau were trying to get the children out, away from the program. They were rescuing them, not being abducted, Diana said, the pieces falling into place. And using El Cuchillo's network to smuggle them into Mexico, then probably somewhere, without extradition, Miguel concluded. But something went wrong. Someone betrayed them too, Jacob suggested, opening another file. This is a report identifying a compromised asset within the Sinaloa cartel, someone feeding information to both El Cuchillo and US intelligence. The name in the report made Miguel's stomach drop. Alan Prescott, he read aloud. My boss. Chief Prescott is working with the cartel. Diana asked incredulously. Not with them, Miguel corrected grimly. He's controlling them, and using us. Miguel's mind raced, reconstructing events with this new information. Prescott has been playing both sides. He knew the scientists were fleeing with the children. He positioned us as bait, knowing El Cuchillo would ambush us. But why? Diana asked. Why sacrifice his own agents? Because he needed a reason to deploy the Marines, Miguel realized. Border Patrol agents under attack gave them the justification for a military operation on US soil. The ambush was never about killing us. It was about creating an incident. And now Sarah's dead because she figured it out, Diana said softly. Just like they tried to silence Tomas. Miguel stood abruptly. We need to go, now. Prescott will know we've gone off-grid. Where? Diana asked, struggling to her feet. We can't go home. We can't go to the station. We need to get this information to someone who can't be controlled by DHS or Prescott, Miguel decided. Someone with enough authority to launch an independent investigation. The FBI? Jacob suggested. Miguel shook his head. Too close to DHS. We need someone completely outside the chain of command. The press? Diana offered. Too risky. They'd never publish without corroboration, and that would take time we don't have. Miguel thought for a moment, then turned to Jacob. Can you copy these files? All of them. Jacob nodded. Already did. To these. He handed them each a small flash drive. Identical copies, encrypted. You'll need this password to access them. He wrote down a complex string of characters. Thank you, Miguel said, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder. Your father would be proud. Find who's responsible, Jacob replied, his voice tight with emotion. Make them pay. As they prepared to leave, Miguel's burner phone rang. The number was blocked. Hernandez, he answered cautiously. It's Rivera. The Marine's voice was tense, urgent. They're coming for you. Voss has issued detention orders for you and Reyes. They're calling you fugitives. How did you know how to reach me? No time to explain. They traced your location to Scottsdale. Multiple teams converging. You have maybe 15 minutes. Who can we trust? Miguel asked, already moving toward the door, gesturing for Diana to follow. No one in the chain of command, Rivera replied. But I might have someone. A reporter with military connections. Someone who's exposed government black ops before. I can arrange a meeting. Where and when? Old airfield outside Casa Grande. 2 hours. We'll be there. And Rivera? Thanks. Don't thank me yet, the Marine replied grimly. Just stay alive. Miguel ended the call and turned to Jacob. We need to go. If anyone asks, you were never here, Jacob finished. Be careful. They left the apartment building through the service exit, Miguel supporting Diana as they navigated the back alleys of the neighborhood. Her injured leg was slowing them down considerably. I'm a liability, she said through gritted teeth. You should go without me. Not happening, Miguel replied firmly. We started this together, we'll finish it together. They needed transportation, but their options were limited. Stealing another vehicle would attract attention they couldn't afford. Public transportation would expose them to too many cameras. Miguel made a quick decision. We need help. Someone with resources who isn't connected to this. Who do you know that fits that description? Miguel pulled out his phone. My brother, construction contractor, has a fleet of work trucks, no questions asked. 20 minutes later, they were in the back of a dusty pickup with Hernandez Construction painted on the side. Miguel's brother Carlos at the wheel, his expression grim but determined. You know I'm harboring fugitives, right? Carlos said, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. Only if we're caught, Miguel replied. Casa Grande, the old airfield. Carlos nodded. What kind of trouble are you in, little brother? The kind where knowing too much is dangerous. Government stuff? The worst kind. Carlos whistled softly. Always knew your job would get you killed someday. Not today, Miguel said with determination. Not if I can help it. The old airfield outside Casa Grande had been abandoned for decades. Its runways cracked and overgrown, hangars collapsing from neglect. Carlos dropped them at the perimeter and left immediately, knowing better than to ask questions. No sign of Rivera, Diana observed, scanning the desolate landscape. Or anyone else. Miguel checked his watch. We're early. Find cover and wait. They positioned themselves in the shadow of a dilapidated hangar with good visibility of the approach. Roads. The midday sun beat down mercilessly. the heat shimmering off the cracked concrete. "If this is a setup," Diana said quietly, checking her sidearm, "we're completely exposed." "If it's a setup, we're already dead," Miguel replied. "But Rivera could have given us up hours ago. He didn't." They fell silent, watching and waiting. Minutes stretched into an hour with no sign of Rivera or his contact. "Something's wrong," Diana finally said. "He should be here by now." Miguel was about to agree when a dust cloud appeared on the horizon, a vehicle approaching fast. They tensed, weapons ready, as the vehicle drew closer. It was a nondescript sedan, civilian plates. It stopped 100 yards away, and a single figure emerged. Not Rivera, but a woman in her 40s with short-cropped hair and the confident bearing of a veteran. "That's not Rivera," Diana whispered. "No," Miguel agreed, "but I think it's his contact." The woman stood beside her car, making no move to approach. She raised her hands, showing she was unarmed, then called out, "Agent Hernandez, I'm Catherine." "Weiss. Marcus sent me." Marcus, Rivera's first name. Few people knew it, a small but significant verification. "Stay here," Miguel told Diana, then emerged cautiously from cover. "Where's Rivera?" Weiss's expression tightened. "Detained. Internal investigation. He managed to get word to me before they took him." "Why should we trust you?" "Because I've spent 15 years exposing government black ops," she replied calmly, "including Project Whisper 4 years ago, before they buried my story and discredited my sources." Miguel approached slowly, still wary. "You know about the children?" "I know they represent the next frontier in psychological warfare, and I know powerful people will do anything to control them." She gestured to her car. "We don't have much time. Rivera said you have evidence. Proof of a conspiracy involving DHS, Border Patrol leadership, and the exploitation of children with enhanced cognitive abilities," Miguel confirmed. "Enough to bring down senior officials." "Show me." Miguel hesitated, then signaled for Diana to join them. She approached cautiously, still favoring her injured leg. "The drive," Miguel said, extending his hand. Diana removed her copy from her pocket and handed it to him. Miguel passed it to Weiss. "The password?" she asked. "When we're somewhere safe," Miguel replied. "And after you tell us exactly how you're going to use this information." Weiss studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Smart. I have a safe house, about 40 minutes from here. We can talk there." "Your car could be tracked," Diana pointed out. "It's clean. I sweep it daily." Weiss glanced at Diana's leg. "You need medical attention." "I'm fine," Diana insisted, though her pallor suggested otherwise. "Let's go," Miguel decided, helping Diana toward the car. As they approached, the sound of helicopter rotors suddenly cut through the desert silence. "Down!" Miguel shouted, pulling Diana to the ground as a black helicopter crested the ridge, flying low and fast. Weiss dove behind her car as the helicopter banked sharply, its side door sliding open to reveal a gunman with an automatic weapon. "Crawl to the hangar," Miguel yelled to Diana over the deafening rotor wash, drawing his sidearm. The first burst of gunfire kicked up dirt around them as they scrambled toward cover. Miguel returned fire, knowing his handgun was useless against the helicopter, but hoping to at least force the gunner to duck. Weiss pulled a rifle from her trunk, a scoped hunting rifle, and took aim at the helicopter. Her first shot shattered the windshield. The pilot veered sharply, momentarily breaking off the attack. "Inside!" Weiss shouted, covering their retreat to the hangar. The interior was dim and cluttered with abandoned equipment. Miguel helped Diana, behind an old fuel drum, while Weiss took position at a broken window, rifle ready. "How did they find us?" Diana gasped, her face contorted with pain. The sprint had aggravated her injuries. "I don't know," Miguel replied, scanning for exits. "But we need to—" His words were cut off by another sound, vehicles approaching fast. Through gaps in the hangar's walls, he could see 3 black SUVs racing toward them, dust billowing behind them. "DHS tactical team," Weiss confirmed grimly. "We're surrounded." Miguel assessed their situation. 1 injured agent, a reporter with a hunting rifle, and himself against a helicopter and a tactical team. The odds were impossible. "We need to split up," he decided. "Diana, you go with Weiss. I'll create a diversion." "No," Diana objected. "We stay together. The information is what matters," Miguel insisted. "You both have copies. One of you needs to get it out." Weiss nodded her understanding. "There's a drainage culvert behind the hangars. It leads to the old access road. My car keys." She tossed them to Diana. "It's your best chance." The helicopter made another pass, machine gun fire tearing through the corrugated metal of the hangar roof. Outside, the SUVs had stopped, and men in tactical gear were deploying, moving to surround the building. "Go," Miguel urged. Now, while they're focusing on the front, Diana gripped his arm. "This isn't goodbye. We'll find each other when it's over." Miguel nodded, though they both knew the promise might be empty. On three, I'll draw their fire to the east side. The moment Diana and Weiss slipped out the back, Miguel moved to the east window and fired 3 rapid shots, immediately drawing return fire from the tactical team. He ran crouching to another position, fired again, then another, creating the impression of multiple defenders. Through a crack in the wall, he saw Diana and Weiss reach the drainage culvert and disappear inside. Relief flooded through him. They had a chance. A voice called through a bullhorn. "Agent Hernandez, this is Special Agent Voss. You are surrounded. Surrender immediately." Miguel didn't respond, continuing his mobile defense, firing sparingly to conserve ammunition. "We have Agent Mendoza," Voss called. "He's in critical condition. Surrender now, and I give you my word he'll receive proper medical care." The threat was clear. Surrender or Tomas dies. Miguel felt rage surge through him, but he controlled it, channeling it into focus. The tactical team was closing in, moving, from cover to cover. Miguel counted at least 12 operators, professional, coordinated, and lethal. His ammunition wouldn't last another 5 minutes. Then he saw it. One of the SUVs, parked with its driver still inside, engine running. It was positioned behind the main tactical line, ready for quick extraction if needed. Miguel calculated the distance, the angles, the timing required. It was a desperate plan, but the only one available. He waited until the tactical team initiated another coordinated advance, then sprinted for the back of the hangar. Bullets tore through the metal walls around him as he burst through a rusted door and ran in a low crouch toward the drainage culvert. But instead of following Diana and Weiss, he cut sharply east, using scattered debris for momentary cover. The helicopter spotted him, banking hard to bring its gunner to bear. Miguel zigzagged, timing his movements to the helicopter's position, using its blind spots during turns. A bullet grazed his arm. Another tore through his pant leg. He kept running, his lungs burning, legs pumping with desperate energy. The SUV was 30 yards away. 20. The driver had spotted him and was reaching for his weapon. Miguel fired his last 2 rounds at the windshield. The driver ducked instinctively, giving Miguel the second she needed to reach the vehicle. He tore open the door, dragged the surprised driver out, and threw himself behind the wheel. Bullets pinged off the armored bodywork as he slammed the transmission into drive and floored the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward, rapidly gaining speed. The tactical team scrambled to reposition, their formation broken by his unexpected move. Miguel crashed through a chain-link fence, the helicopter in pursuit, bullets strafing the ground around him. The SUV's engine roared as he pushed it to its limits, heading for the main highway. In the rearview mirror, he could see the helicopter keeping pace, but the tactical team was falling behind. If he could reach the highway, blend with traffic. His radio crackled. They were using the SUV's communication system to reach him. "This is only delaying the inevitable, Hernandez." Voss's voice was cold, controlled. "We have your partner. We'll find the reporter. There's nowhere you can hide." Miguel ignored her, focusing on driving, on staying alive for the next minute, the next mile. "The children aren't what you think," Voss continued. "They're dangerous, uncontrollable. We're trying to protect people." By experimenting on kids, Miguel couldn't help responding. "By killing agents who discover the truth. Sacrifices for the greater good," Voss replied calmly. "The abilities these children possess, they could change the nature of warfare, of intelligence gathering, of national security. Imagine soldiers who can make the enemy see things that aren't there. Interrogators who can extract information without asking questions. The potential is limitless." "They're children," Miguel spat, "not weapons." "They stopped being children the moment they were born with these abilities," Voss countered. "Nature created the weapons. We're just learning to use them." The highway appeared ahead, and with it, a roadblock. Police vehicles, lights flashing, officers with weapons drawn. Voss had called ahead. Miguel assessed his options in seconds. The roadblock covered the highway completely. The desert terrain, on either side, was impassable for the SUV. Behind him, the helicopter was closing in. No way forward, no way back. He made his decision, turning sharply off the road before reaching the roadblock, driving the SUV down a steep embankment toward a dry riverbed. The vehicle bounced violently, threatening to overturn, but somehow stayed upright as it skidded to the bottom. The riverbed offered a new escape route, rough but navigable. Miguel accelerated again, dust billowing behind him as the SUV bounced over the uneven terrain. The helicopter continued its pursuit, but the narrow riverbed with its overhanging vegetation made targeting difficult. For several precious minutes, Miguel made progress, putting distance between himself and the roadblock. Then the riverbed widened, vegetation thinning, exposing him to the helicopter once more. Ahead, the terrain rose sharply, a dead end where flash floods had carved a small waterfall during rainy seasons. Miguel was trapped again. He could try to climb out of the riverbed on foot, but he'd be completely exposed. Staying with the vehicle offered protection from gunfire but no escape route. The helicopter hovered overhead, its spotlight finding him despite the daylight. Through the bullhorn, Voss's voice again. Final chance, Hernandez. Surrender now. Miguel's response was to grab the flash drive from his pocket, the copy of the evidence against them. He held it up, making sure they could see it clearly through the windshield. Order your men to back off, he shouted, knowing they could hear him through the vehicle's communication system. Or I destroy everything right now. A pause, then. You're bluffing. You want that evidence public. I want to live more, Miguel lied. Back off. Give me a clear route to the border. Once I'm across, I'll tell you where to find the original files. Another pause, longer this time. The helicopter maintained its position, but didn't open fire. You have no guarantees I'll honor that arrangement, Voss finally replied. I have no guarantees of anything, Miguel acknowledged, but it's your only chance to contain this. The standoff stretched on, seconds turning to minutes. Miguel kept the flash drive visible, his other hand on the steering wheel, ready to move, if given the opportunity. Finally, Voss's voice returned. We're withdrawing to a 5-mile perimeter. You have 15 minutes to decide. Surrender with the evidence, or we resume pursuit with all available resources. The helicopter backed away slowly, maintaining visual contact but increasing its distance. Through the communications system, Miguel could hear Voss ordering the roadblock to pull back temporarily. It was a ruse, of course. They'd never let him reach the border. The moment he moved, they'd close in again. But he'd bought time, precious minutes to think, to plan. Miguel studied his surroundings more carefully. The riverbed, the eroded banks, the waterfall ahead. Something about the terrain nagged at his memory. A detail from years of border patrol work. Then it clicked. This wasn't just any riverbed. It was part of the old smuggling network, used for decades before Border Patrol increased surveillance. And if his memory served correctly, he exited the SUV, staying low, and moved toward the waterfall. Behind the curtain of eroded earth and stone should be there. A narrow opening, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. A smuggler's tunnel, hand-dug decades ago, connecting to a network that ran for miles beneath the desert. Miguel returned to the SUV and retrieved a flashlight from the tactical gear in the back. Then, with a final glance at the distant helicopter, he slipped into the tunnel and disappeared into the darkness. The path forward was uncertain, dangerous. But for the first time since the ambush in the canyon, he had a chance. Not just to escape, but to expose the truth and bring justice to those responsible. For Wilson, for Sarah, for the children being exploited, the hunt had escalated to its most dangerous phase, and Miguel was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for justice in a game where the most powerful players had decided the rules no longer applied. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the night air, startling the cartel gunmen, who'd thought victory was assured. Miguel, Diana, and their remaining team members huddled behind cover in the canyon as the helicopter's spotlight illuminated the ridgeline. Border Patrol agents, this is Sierra Actual. Marine Special Operations. Inbound. Mark your position. Over. Miguel fumbled for the emergency flare on his belt. Get ready. When I pop this, all hell's gonna break loose. Diana managed a tight smile despite her wounds. More than it already has? The flare shot upward, and within seconds, 4 Marines, fast roped down, forming a protective perimeter around the agents. Supervisory Agent Hernandez, one approached. Master Sergeant Rivera, Marine Special Operations, Medevac inbound. Rivera's team quickly stabilized the wounded agents, working with practiced efficiency. As the medevac helicopter arrived for the injured, Rivera pulled Miguel aside. "Sir, intelligence confirms El Cuchillo is attempting to evacuate high-value targets, scientists, and 2 children." Miguel felt a surge of purpose despite his exhaustion. "I'm coming with you." As the medevac lifted off with Diana, Tomas, and the other wounded, Miguel joined Rivera's team, moving rapidly toward El Cuchillo's position. Through the chaos of the firefight, Miguel caught sight of the cartel leader, not the brute he'd expected, but a slender, scholarly-looking man with cold, merciless eyes. El Cuchillo spotted him too, and raised a remote detonator, smiling coldly. "Bomb!" Miguel shouted, but when El Cuchillo pressed the button, nothing happened. "Jammed frequencies," Rivera explained later, as Miguel's precise shots took down the notorious cartel enforcer. As the Marines secured the area, Miguel glimpsed the rescued hostages, 2 scientists and 2 children, a boy and girl about 10 years old. The girl turned, seeming to look directly at Miguel with unsettling awareness, before being led away to a separate helicopter. 3 days later, Miguel sat in a private hospital room reviewing what they'd learned. Project Whisper, a classified program studying children with extraordinary cognitive abilities. The ambush hadn't been random. They'd been set up by someone high within Border Patrol. The door opened as Chief Prescott entered, looking haggard. "Your team is stable," Prescott reported. "Except Wilson. Full honor's funeral next week." Miguel cut to the chase. "The operation? The scientists and children? Classified above our pay grades," Prescott replied evasively. The door opened again, interrupting their conversation. A woman in a dark suit entered, followed by Rivera. "Agent Hernandez, I'm Special Agent Karen Voss, Department of Homeland Security. We need to speak privately." After Prescott left, Voss was blunt. "The evidence suggests there was a leak from inside Border Patrol. Someone with intimate knowledge of your positions and protocols." "Who?" Miguel demanded. "That's what we need to determine," Voss replied. "And you're going to help us by returning to duty and acting as if nothing is wrong." Miguel's suspicions grew when Rivera pulled him aside later. "The children, I've never seen anything like it." During extraction, one of them, the girl, she looked at Martinez, "One of my men." He froze completely, then started screaming about spiders crawling under his skin. There were no spiders. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful, Hernandez. This goes deeper than a cartel moving product. Much deeper." That evening, Miguel visited Sarah's apartment to update her on their next steps. He found the door ajar and Sarah inside, surrounded by intelligence reports. "El Cuchillo has been meeting with people outside his normal circles," she explained, showing him the files, including a former Russian intelligence officer. This wasn't about drugs, it was about the scientists and children. As they examined the evidence, Miguel received a text from Rivera requesting an urgent meeting. "I should go," Miguel said, standing. "Keep digging, but be careful." Outside, he noticed a black SUV with tinted windows that hadn't been there before. Instinct screaming, he drove to meet Rivera at a neutral location, taking precautions against being followed. The meeting confirmed his worst fears. Something was very wrong within DHS. Your agent Mendoza was asking questions about what he saw. After he spoke to Voss, she ordered him sedated and transported to a classified facility. Rivera handed Miguel a flash drive. "Encrypted files from Voss's laptop. I can't access them, but maybe you know someone who can." As Miguel left the diner, breaking news scrolled across a television. Border Patrol agent found dead in apparent suicide. Sarah's building. Miguel's blood ran cold. "It's a setup," Diana insisted from her hospital bed as Miguel showed her the encrypted files Jacob Wilson had managed to access. Project Whisper isn't just research. They're weaponizing these children's abilities. The files revealed the children, Elise and Martin, could manipulate perception and predict outcomes with uncanny accuracy. More disturbing was the evidence that their own chief, Alan Prescott, had been working with both DHS and the cartel, deliberately positioning Miguel's team as bait. He needed a reason to deploy the Marines, Miguel realized. Border Patrol agents, under attack, gave them justification for a military operation on US soil. "And now, Sarah's dead because she figured it out," Diana said grimly. Their planning was interrupted when armed men surrounded the hospital. Miguel helped Diana escape through service corridors as DHS tactical teams searched the building. "We need someone with authority who can't be controlled by DHS," Miguel said as they fled in a stolen vehicle. "The Marines," Diana suggested, "the commander who authorized Rivera's team." Through a series of covert communications, they eventually connected with General Michael Lancaster, who was already investigating the misuse of his men in Diablo Canyon. "This operation goes beyond all standard protocols," Lancaster explained when they finally met at a secure location. "A black project using military assets without proper authorization for domestic operations against US citizens." "Why help us?" Miguel asked directly. "Because I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to any agency or individual," Lancaster replied. "My men were used illegally, and Border Patrol agents died. That crosses a line I cannot ignore." Intelligence revealed the children and scientists were being held at a classified DHS facility with plans to move them internationally within 24 hours. "Once they're outside US territory, we lose any chance of helping them," Rivera warned. Lancaster outlined a daring plan. "A small team infiltrates the facility, extracts the children and scientists, while simultaneously presenting your evidence to the Defense Secretary and Senate Intelligence Committee." "You want us to lead the extraction," Miguel concluded. "You've had direct contact with the children. They might trust you," Lancaster confirmed. They prepared for the mission. Miguel realized they had reached the point of no return. Within hours, they would be infiltrating a government black site to rescue children with extraordinary abilities from their own government. The infiltration began precisely at 0200. Miguel and Diana breached the facility's perimeter using specialized equipment, while Team 2 created a diversion on the opposite side. They located the detention section where Elise and Martin were being prepared for transport, along with scientists Dr. Richter and Dr. Moreau. A swift, precise entry neutralized the guards and medical staff without casualties. "We're here to help you," Diana told the scientists as Miguel checked the sedated children. As they prepared to escape, Elise spoke with unnerving clarity despite her sedation. "He's coming. The one who sees us as weapons, not children." Gunfire erupted in the corridor as DHS tactical teams converged on their position. "Diana, lead them out. I'll cover," Miguel ordered, maintaining suppressive fire to buy them time. As Miguel began his fighting withdrawal, a figure appeared amid the chaos, Chief Prescott, inexplicably calm despite the firefight around him. "Miguel," he called. "Enough. You're only making this worse. Like you ensured Wilson's safety," Miguel fired back. "Or Sarah's." "Regrettable casualties," Prescott replied with unsettling detachment. "But necessary for the greater mission." "What mission?" "Experimenting on children." "They're not just children," Prescott countered. "They represent the evolution of warfare. Whoever controls them controls the future of global intelligence operations." As they argued, Prescott revealed himself as part of something larger than DHS or Border Patrol, the director, answering to private interests beyond government oversight. When Prescott produced a remote control threatening to activate sanitization protocols that would destroy the facility and everyone inside, Miguel made a split-second decision. His shot was perfect, shattering the device in Prescott's hand. "You have no idea what you've done," Prescott raged. "I know exactly what I've done," Miguel replied, backing toward the exit. "I've chosen humanity over security." Miguel escaped to the roof as the facility began self-destructing, boarding the extraction helicopter, where Diana waited with the scientists and children. As they lifted off, he saw Elise watching him with that penetrating gaze. "You're different," she said simply. "You see us as children first." "Because that's what you are," Miguel replied. Elise's expression remained solemn. "Not to them. Not to the director." "Prescott won't hurt you anymore," Miguel assured her. "Not Prescott," she corrected. "He just follows orders." 3 days later at Fort Huachuca, Miguel and Diana learned the operation had exposed significant portions of the conspiracy. Several high-ranking officials across multiple agencies had suddenly taken administrative leave or resigned for personal reasons. But when they discovered the children and Dr. Richter had vanished from their secure quarters, Miguel wasn't surprised. A note from Elise explained, "We won't live in another cage. Dr. Richter is helping us find others like us, children living normal lives, with families who don't know what their children can do. We need to find them before the director does. P.S. When you're ready to know the truth about the director, look at the authorization chain for the Marine deployment to Diablo Canyon." Investigation of those documents revealed the shocking truth. The Deployment orders had been expertly forged, originating from Senator Howard Blackwood's office. The ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee was the true director, using his position to run clandestine operations with impunity. Nearly impossible to touch without ironclad evidence, Lancaster warned. Wilson's funeral brought the Border Patrol family together in grief, though few knew the true circumstances of his death. Afterward, Catherine Weiss approached Miguel with news. Financial investigations were connecting Blackwood to private military contractors involved in the program, and border agents in California had reported an unusual incident: surveillance systems failing as agents approached a vehicle containing what they described as a young girl making eye contact with them. They're finding others, Miguel realized, building their network. Weiss also delivered welcome news. Miguel, Diana, and eventually Tomas were being reinstated, assigned to a special task force investigating the conspiracy under FBI Deputy Director Chen's authority. Weeks later, Miguel and Diana stood on the ridge overlooking Diablo Canyon where everything had begun. "Why did you want to come back here?" Diana asked. "To remember," Miguel replied. "What we survived, what we discovered, what we still have to do." His secure phone vibrated with coordinates and 2 words: "Found another." Elise and Martin continuing their mission parallel to his own, protecting children with extraordinary abilities from those who would weaponize them. "We should go," Diana said. "Chen's briefing starts soon." Miguel took a final look at the canyon, no longer seeing it as a place of ambush and death, but as the crucible where purpose had been forged. "Until justice," he said quietly. Diana's hand found his. "Until justice," she confirmed. Together they turned from the canyon, leaving the past behind but carrying its lessons forward. The sun cast their shadows long across the desert soil, 2 figures moving in unison, determined and unwavering. Some battles were fought with bullets, as they had in Diablo Canyon, when Marine snipers turned the tide against cartel hitmen. But the greater war, for justice, for truth, for the right of children to remain children, rather than becoming weapons, would be fought with evidence, testimony, and unwavering commitment. That was the patrol they had chosen. That was the border they would defend until justice.